Welcome back. We are here now with Lesley Moffett from TD Bank. Thank you for coming. Lesley, you are with the business banking division with TD, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So tell me, what's the difference between your division and the residential side?
The residential side comes under personal lending, the retail branch. I actually am a business lender. I come under the business bank, which falls under commercial bank. So residential mortgages go to a personal mortgage. A lot of the rural agriculture comes to me. So very different banks, very different products.
Okay, that's interesting because my experience has been that the acreage goes to the residential person at the lending office. But what you're saying is there's another alternative.
Absolutely. When you get a residential appraisal done, the appraiser looks at the house and 5 acres. Anyone that has more than 5 acres are not getting the value for the additional acreage and for the outbuildings.
One of our challenges.
By moving to the business bank, it may be that we can get the value for those businesses and other acres.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be, I just want to reiterate that. So that's 5 acres or more. Is that right?
5 acres or more.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Would you say, I'm going to go back to the MLS listing. Would you say that there would be a better way to write the descriptions on a listing that would help lenders approve mortgages?
From a personal lending side, they look at the MLS and they see, yes, it's a house, it has X number of acres. Then they would write it on that. When I look at the MLS, what I'm looking for is number of acres. That's the first thing. If there's outbuildings, any other information like that. And I typically find that on the MLS listings that I've dealt with. The realtors are pretty good about saying it's 10.62 acres. It has a double-car garage, a heated shop. Those are the kind of factors I'm looking for.
Okay.
So if that kind of information is all on the listing, then that certainly helps from a lending perspective. If it comes into the personal lending retail section, that personal lender will often say, this has got an awful lot of outbuildings, extra acreage. Maybe you should be looking at on the rural property side.
Okay. So let's say I bring a client to TD Bank and they apply for a mortgage on the personal side, and it is 9.6 acres. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say that it doesn't seem to be working. The qualifications of the borrower might not be there.
Right.
The usage of the acreage might not be what the residential side is looking for. If you go to the residential side, is there any inhibitor or is there any reason why you can't then go to the business side?
No, there's no reason except possibly a delay in time and a difference in appraisal. Okay. Because when you get a residential appraisal, it's strictly the house, 5 acres. Typically, it's about a $300 appraisal fee. If you come to me, we're looking at the house and 5 acres, so we'll probably get the same valuation that the previous appraiser has done, but then we also look at the accompanying acres and the outbuildings. If a residential appraiser is there 20 minutes, a rural property appraiser could be there 2 hours. They're very much in depth. What that means, though, is the $300 appraisal you've already paid for doesn't count.
On the if you went to the residential side first.
If you move to the business, our appraisals are a lot more money. They're about $1,000. But again, they're doing a much more in-depth examination, and this is what gives you the value on that extra acreage and outbuildings.
And I'm assuming the appraiser that you hire would be more qualified to do.
Absolutely, yes. They're not your usual residential appraisers. They're looking at much different things on that property, and they are all approved and qualified by TD. If there is an issue with an appraiser, a consistent problem, then they are no longer on our approved list. Okay. So we listen to our customers, right? We want those appraisals coming in where they should be and in a timely fashion.
Okay. Yeah. So this is just a side question. Let's say an appraisal came back, and as the realtor, we believe that appraiser or the appraisal is off. What would you recommend to the realtor? Is there any recourse at all?
Well, if it's a TD Realtor and we're seeing an appraisal that is much lower than sort of was expected, there is an appeal process. So typically how that would happen, the customer would say that isn't nearly what we had expected. The process is we can send out a second appraiser, and there's a grid. If it comes in lower, higher, within a certain amount, you don't have to pay for the second appraisal. Okay. If the appraisal comes in within a certain parameter, then you end up paying for two. But again, if there's a $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 discrepancy and it's might cost you $300, you're weighing what's your options.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Can you tell me why outbuildings are not included in the valuation of properties? And I guess that's on the residential side. So which isn't under your, so only residential. If the application goes to the business banking side, those outbuildings can be included in the value.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. That's the whole purpose of it, to get the value for the extra acreage and the outbuildings.
Yeah. So why is that? And are there other requirements then? So I guess what I'm getting at is, does there have to be income on the property for those outbuildings to be?
No. To qualify for the rural property mortgage, and that's one of several different options for ag property, you have to have 75% of the household income comes from income that is not related to the property.
Not related to the
property.
property.
Not related to the property.
Okay.
So if you have an engineer whose wife has a riding arena, the bulk of their income is coming from his employment. She may get some income from the riding arena. As long as it's 25% or less, then we can look at a rural property mortgage.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Are there any red flags or risk factors that you would want realtors to be aware of when they're looking at possibly writing up an offer on an acreage?
Not risk factors per se. I mean, obvious ones. If you know that part of this acreage used to be a gas station or had fertilizer stored on. Absolutely. Okay. If this has been farmland that's been subdivided into 10-acre issues, there's a very short questionnaire that the buyer completes on environmental. But when you think there might be a further issue, that would be a red flag, because no one likes to lend on environmental hazards.
Right.
Again, what we're looking for, same as on the personal side, personal income, their debt servicing, it all plays the same role in the actual approval of a deal.
Okay. Yeah. And are environmental studies ever required?
Typically on ag lands, no. I do commercial lending as well, and I have had environmental studies on land that had questionable uses even 30, 40 years ago.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Now, we had talked previously about water wells. What are your requirements, or what is the bank's requirements on information pertaining to water wells?
Right. Typically, one of the conditions after a deal has been approved, we come down with a list of conditions. One is the appraisal, one is a water well certificate. Certificate. Yes, okay. And there are experts, that's all they do is test the potability of your water, the flow of your water. So we don't need any of the background information, just the certificate that says it has passed and it's usable.
Okay.
So again, if you have a buyer, that's something he might want to get from the previous owner. Otherwise, he's going to have to order one himself, organize it, pay for it.
Yeah. Okay. And now, from my experience, usually that may be a condition that we write in the offer, that we want to, there's a water condition. So to confirm GPM, confirm potability, but what you're saying is that's also a condition of the bank.
It would be a condition of lending.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have any opinion on real property reports? Is that a requirement on behalf of the bank?
No, we strictly go on whatever appraisal comes in.
So if the appraiser asks for the real property report?
then normally as a buyer, you would want that anyways because you need it for your lawyer. Whether the appraiser asks for that, I actually don't know.
Okay.
The bank doesn't ask for it.
Okay. So when we typically write an offer, we have a condition period, and typically, I would say, we would give at least 10 business days
Right.
for a condition period, whether it's financing, water condition,
Right.
sewer, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What would the bank want to see?
That doesn't work, that timeline.
10 business days
it
doesn't work. Okay.
On residential, often it does, mostly it does. Most of the buyers, they come in, they're pre-approved. So all their financial data has already been approved, it's already been assessed. Then they find the property, they bring in the offer. It's a pretty easy process to have the appraisal and to get the deal funded. So your 10 days there, probably very realistic. Very different on the business side. So again, they would come, we don't do pre-approvals. So when they find a property and they say, this is the property I'm looking at that point, we get the information from you or the buyer, the MLS, any background information. Then we have to start the assessment process, because keep in mind, they haven't been pre-approved.
Right.
So we're starting from square one. Business underwriters do a very different in-depth analysis. That takes more time. Once the deal comes back to me and there are conditions such as an appraisal, then we have to assign it through the National Appraisal Service. It can sometimes take a week, 2 weeks to get a rural appraiser. They're a different designation. They spend a lot more time on each appraisal, so they can't do as many in a day. It often then takes them several days to get the written report back to the underwriters. So this takes your 10 days. It could conceivably be several weeks. If someone wants to buy a property and the seller's interested in selling, it's not an issue typically if it's taking longer to fund, but it is nice to know going in that it's not going to be a 10-day turnaround.
Okay, so from the lender's, the bank's standpoint, what do you want to see on that financing condition? How much time would you like to see on that offer?
Optimistically, 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that isn't crazy.
That's not to say that would happen.
We may still need to get an extension.
Because keep in mind, it's not actually the bank that's holding things up. In a lot of cases, it's the whole appraisal process.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
That is really good to know. Okay. A couple of specifics. Preserved wood basements. Does the bank have any concerns about preserved wood basements?
Okay, keeping in mind I don't do personal lending, but and having lived in High River for the last 20 years, a lot of those houses do have the preserved wood basements.
Yeah.
To my knowledge.
And those houses are still standing.
Still standing. The people I know personally that have had to remortgage to get money to do renovations and that, they've had no issues.
Okay.
No issues getting a mortgage. There may be specific issues. One thing I have realized is you need verification that any water damage, not flood damage necessarily, has to show, you have to have that documentation to show that it has been properly remediated.
Okay.
So again, if you're selling a property that has had water damage, like I had one septic backup last week, they needed something from the insurance company and the contractor to show that it had been completely renovated properly and that it passed whatever testing needed to be done. Right. That can hold up a deal if now you have to go to your insurance company.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, so this is going to get back to the personal a bit, and maybe you won't be able to answer this, but are there any differences in terms of funding mobile homes, even if it's on a 10-acre parcel?
Yeah, mobile homes come under CMHC, the CLIP program. Okay. They're high ratio. With they have to be an insured mortgage, so they don't fall under the business bank. They would have to fall under the personal bank. We see these now and again. We don't see a lot of them, but it can be written under that CLIP program.
Okay. Okay. So definitely not a product that would be considered on the business banking side.
Not under something like a personal property mortgage. It may fall under one of the ag products, like a long-term farm loan where you're basically lending on the agricultural acreage. So again, we don't say no out of hand. It's an individual case-by-case basis.
That's okay. That's hopeful. Raw land. What is the loan to value ratio on raw land?
Under the business bank, it's 50%, and I
Okay.
believe it's the same on personal.
Yeah. Okay.
50%.
And that's sort of a standard.
Yeah, across the board.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just to summarize, and I guess to go over the basic points again.
Okay.
And some of you may think that this is very dry information, but I find it very, what's the word,
I enjoy
titillating. So you can go the traditional route of taking your application to your lender and going the residential side,
Yes.
residential banking.
Right.
Or as an alternative, you could, if it's 5 acres or more, you could request your lender to consider it as a business.
Yes, if it falls into the right criteria. So again, the criteria is 5+ acres, 75% of the household income is from income not related to the land. It has to be your principal residence. Okay. So if it sort of fits in those general guidelines, absolutely the business bank can look at it. And again, if your buyer is going to the bank, they probably originally would meet with a personal lender, but at that point they could say to the personal lender, I know there's this other option. Can you advise me on, is that something I should be considering? And at that point, the business or the personal lender would contact me and say, come in, meet with customer, and let's talk together about what works best.
What about rate? That's something we didn't talk about.
This is the business bank, so it is more expensive than personal lending. The interest rates are higher.
How much higher?
They would probably be at least 1.5 points higher.
Okay.
The appraisals obviously would be higher. So again, something to consider. Those are initial upfront costs that'll be more expensive, but if you get value for all of that other property and outbuildings, it certainly outweighs any additional upfront costs.
So if I was the customer and I came to see you and I said, look, I'm thinking about buying this property, which is 12 acres, it has a house, an arena, and I showed you the MLS listing. I haven't written an offer on it yet. Would you be able to tell me if this looked promising?
Absolutely.
Would you recommend that? Not that you're giving me a pre-approval, but would you recommend that a customer comes to you first?
They often come to me first because they just don't know where else to go.
Yeah.
But the other thing is if they come to me, absolutely. If I can look at it and say, yeah, it doesn't fit the criteria, you would need a personal lender, then we would just transfer them over. But even from a realtor, if you're writing up a listing and you're saying this is sort of what it's looking like, can I recommend that they look in this avenue as well? I mean, absolutely. If it fits the criteria, a quick phone call and email, I can say, yes, absolutely, we can look at that.
Okay. Okay.
It's just another option, right? It's
Absolutely.
all about helping the customer.
Yes, that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question, and this is a little bit unrelated to rural financing. Is there a difference between Genworth and CMHC?
I did check with my personal peers, and they said at least the way our retail works, they submit it to the underwriters assign it to one or the other. So it's
out of your hands?
Out of our hands, unless it's a mobile where it has to go CLIP, which is CMHC.
Okay.
So
if we, as realtors, want more information about Genworth or CMHC, you should come to the sessions that we hold here at CIR, the Professional Development Center, when we have guests from Genworth or CMHC. Lesley, anything else you'd want to add for the information for our realtors?
No, just to be aware that there are ag products out there where you don't have to be physically farming. So again, we can do any kind of ag lending. So long-term farm loans. So a person is, he has a house, but he wants money to maybe build a new barn. He wants to put an addition on. We can that wouldn't fit under residential, any kind of funding. We can do that under the ag bank. So we have the ag bank, the business bank, the commercial bank. There's lots of options out there besides a residential mortgage, 5 acres and a house.
Is this a new venture for TD Bank?
No,
or has it
TD has offered this as long as I've been with the business bank. And I do talk to realtors, but I guess there's sort of a lack of understanding of what it actually can do for your customer, which in turn helps you, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time on a Monday morning to come early and share this information with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope we have the word out.
Yeah, so if our realtors want more information or would like to talk to you directly, how would they get a hold of you?
You have my contact information, so probably the easiest way would be an email.
Okay.
So just email me and I will get back to you within the day.
Okay, we'll share that information.
Okay.
Then. Thank you, Lesley.
Thank you for having me.